You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy. Roisin, what do we got for our viewers today?
We were sitting chatting over coffee and we were saying what are going to be coming up at the doors, what issues, topics, and concerns from the general public going to be at the doorsteps when politicians are out canvassing.
Mm.
So, Paul, if I think it's going to be really interesting because we're not having any
Yeah,
guests this week, but what we're going to do is we're going to go over what we think will be a lot of topics coming
yeah.
up at the doorstep.
The temperature is not just hot outside; it's getting hot in the Irish political sphere in Ireland, and it looks pretty much that all the parties there are on election footing. So we're just going to go through that and see what issues are coming up, and where we think the banana skins could be um, for the political parties in the time ahead.
It's going to be very interesting, Paul. I think it's going to get very hot and bothered and a bit
Yeah,
rocky, and
yeah,
I think things are going to spice up a little bit.
absolutely. And we could look at this program again, Russian in 2 years, back in 2 years' time or 6 months' time, and we could get it completely wrong. So there's no exact science to this.
And I think too, Paul, you've been covering what's in the print media, and I've been doing a lot on the social media end,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the same things coming up and coming up again from the people. And
Yeah.
are the mainstream politicians, the elected politicians, are they so disconnected from the voters and the citizens of Ireland?
Yeah, in one way, it certainly looks that way when we see things that are going on. But I can I get the feeling definitely behind closed doors there are a few people who are very very nervous.
Okay, so Paul, let's look at the first topic that you want to discuss. So, tell
Yeah,
us about this one.
yeah. This is from the Daily Mail. There recently, not Sunday gone, not the Sunday gone by, the Sunday before, and it was by Simon Coveney. Was speaking to a number of business leaders in Cork, and he was telling the business leaders to prepare for an election in November 2024. So that's interesting because the local and European elections are in May of 2024. So they're obviously the latest the general election can be held is March 2025. So they're hoping that if they go a little bit early, and of course we're now into the budget cycle, and we're already seeing kites flying, and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have been they've already started to kind of put their stakes in the ground as regard um, where the priority areas are going to be rushing in the budget, because in the same article it does suggest that, sorry, it doesn't just suggest, it says that between now and 2026 the government or the state could be running surpluses of up to 65 billion euros. So that gives the current
Wow.
government a lot of firepower potentially to, for want of another word, buy the next election. And it in the same article, Simon Coveney says he's confident that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael can come back uh, and get elected. Now, some people might disagree with him completely on that, but in the same article, he doesn't mention whether the Green Party will be part of the next government as well. So that's interesting. So we definitely are. This budget coming up it's in around October is going to be part of a two budget cycle, which the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will be really hoping to um, hammer home the message that they're the best combination to manage the public finances and run the country.
Oh, well, we're going to talk about the Green Party a little later on, Paul, in this,
Yeah.
but like, and there again as well, it mentions the debacle of Schofield, and he tells the
Mm,
Daily Mail, "Sorry, I lied to you all over the affair with a much younger man when I
yeah.
was married." I think there's a lot more going to come out about this. And I
Yeah.
think this is only opening up the can of worms that will come out
Yeah.
within media people, Hollywood, and celebrities and
Yeah.
influencers. I think there's a lot more. This is just the opening up the
Oh
can.
yeah, and Eamon Holmes in his interview with GB News, he didn't hold back. He told it exactly what it is, and it's not going to look good for people in the higher ups of ITV, because it could very well look like that. Things were swept under the carpet and blind eyes were turned, and that's never a good thing.
Well, Paul, I just wouldn't say it was that media company. I say it's across the board in media and the toxicity within the media. I experienced it myself,
Mm,
bullying, intimidation, and being told that I must obey.
okay. Yeah,
And
it can be a tough sphere, all right.
so I think there's a lot more about coming out about
Mm,
the media. It's a lot more than just Philip Schofield and scores being settled, as the producer said. So moving on to the next one, Paul, we are moving forward to, let's go to it, to this Fine Gael fears exodus of sitting TDs set to
yeah.
persist. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so already there's five TDs that have already declared, Roisin, that they're not running at the next election. You have David Staunton, who's the TD down in Cork East. You have Brendan Griffith, who's the TD in Kerry. You have John Paul Phelan from Carlow Kilkenny, who we've interviewed on this program. He's not running. Um,
Be a big
and
loss to Kilkenny with John Paul feeling that, but you can
oh
understand with his health reasons,
yeah,
and
and
a baby as well.
absolutely, he has a lot going on there, and we wish him every success into the future. And
Yeah.
congratulations on the birth of his little son there recently. And the two other TDs that are not running are uh, Michael Creed, former Minister for Agriculture in Cork, and Joe McHugh, former Education Minister. So there would be, if Fine Gael were looking for, I won't say safe seats, but they would stand a good chance of being re-elected. They have established a pretty good base in their home constituency, stuff like that. So with the polls at 20%, they would mean Fine Gael would probably lose a lot of seats, and there probably are a lot of TDs that might be getting on in years. We're not going to call them old or anything.
And you've been
The
ages,
like
Paul.
Not at all, not at all.
There's
The
wisdom and life experiences in age.
100%, 100%. The likes of Richard Bruton is one example. Bernard Durkin
Right.
is another. Mike Ring might even be an example as well. So it's probably they're probably suffering from they're in government nearly 14 years. So
Mm.
generally, the longer parties stay in government, the more they do become unpopular over time. So um, by all accounts, it looks like it could potentially be a very tricky election for Fine Gael, and who knows if this trend in polls continues, could Leo Varadkar's position come under threat as well?
Paul, and when you think about it, really, it wasn't the mandate and the voters in the last election wasn't for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, but
No,
Sinn Féin didn't wish to go forward in government. Do you think?
no,
What's your thoughts on that? That Sinn Féin didn't listen to the people when the people voted for them, the voters, and that's what the polls suggested in the tallies and in the
yeah,
voting stations. And when Sinn Féin gets in, will all the money in the pot be gone? And when Mother Hubbard goes to the cupboard is bare.
that could be the tactic now for the next for the next next two budget cycles anyway. That the the government of the day that we have Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and the Green Party, they have fair old firepower financially. They're behind them, so they will spend, if they want to avoid a kicking at the next election. So, and as regards Sinn Féin will probably say on the flip side that, well, we made overtures, but they refused to speak to us. So, but it is hard. It is going to be. It certainly is interesting times, because on on these numbers that we're seeing that it looks very likely that Sinn Féin will become the largest party after the election next
You
election.
think
And
so, Paul? Do you
well,
think has the people, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Do you think has an awful lot of people, in even the East Wall, which is
mm,
predominantly a Sinn Féin Mary Lou McDonald seat
yeah,
and
that's
area
true.
and
Yeah, that's right.
constituency, and even in Finglas and all that areas in
Mm,
Dublin City, could
mm.
Sinn Féin potentially lose voters?
It could, they could. It certainly it's as if we look at some of the other slides, the whole immigration refugee issue, it is becoming an issue, and there are people who have concerns and they feel they're not being addressed. And I think it definitely with local elections coming up next year, you could see some interesting surprises. The Irish Freedom Party could make some ground in those areas, and
Or aim
maybe
to?
even
Aim to
into
as well?
or maybe some independents as well
Mm.
might share similar views.
Some people say that Sinn Féin have made the same mistake of what Labour did, and
Mm,
they have gone away from their grassroots to a more middle class narrative and have forgotten the grassroots
mm,
members and the political values that the
yeah,
grassroots people have. So, have Sinn Féin really? Is there a sort of let's say a disconnect
yeah,
with
and
their voters?
they probably need to taper, expectations as well, in the sense that the Labour Party probably were at that maybe 10, 12,
Mm,
13 years ago, where they were riding high in the polls and we're all talking of Gilmore for Taoiseach, and
mm,
it didn't the Gilmore Gale, they increased their seats drastically, um which was a record for them at the time. But the problem is, could they overpromise, underdeliver, and then within 9 to 10 months, it'd be kind of we'd be getting maybe, what would you call, uh, another slightly different version of what government we have here at the moment.
Gonna be
By
very
by
interesting.
by slight, it'd be so slight you may not even notice it.
Yeah, because Paul, you and I, that's how we met many, many years ago. God, must how many years ago now?
Well over 10 years ago.
Yeah, in the Labour Party, and we both met Labour Party
Correct.
members, and we used to even canvass. We used to canvass together and things like that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
but that's where the Labour Party made their mistake when we were going out canvassing. Oh no, don't go this area, go to this area. And you and
Yeah.
I both said this is middle class areas. The votes here are either Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil. They're
Oh yeah.
not Labour voters, and they didn't listen. Labour head
Yeah.
office did not listen to
Mm,
grassroots.
yeah.
Could that
Exactly.
be a problem for Sinn Féin? Not listening to grassroots.
Yeah.
And
It could.
Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil too. Are they all?
Yeah. Yeah. And it can become, once you get into government, they can become even more disconnected, because
Mm,
you have to go through a wall of officials and civil servants and advisors and stuff like that, and they're in a bubble.
yeah.
And when you're in a bubble, you can't see beyond your own nose, and that
Well, in a
tends to be the
bubble,
problem.
they weren't, they didn't canvass to go into a bubble. They're not elected to go into a bubble, and they're not paid to be in a bubble. And
Mm,
sometimes I often wonder, do the politicians all of a sudden get brain fog and amnesia of to
yeah,
who they are representing and who elected them once they get elected and they're in the Leinster House?
yeah. That can happen, and then
Yeah.
you also have the civil servants who, for want of another word, they run the country. Probably going to get a bit of a slap on the wrist there from some people, but they have a
True.
lot of clout. If they say something, it will happen. It will happen. If they say it ain't happening, it ain't happening. So
I heard a great analogy of that, Paul, a couple of
yeah,
weeks ago. It was, now, you know how I get things mixed up. It's like me telling the joke. I always remember the middle
yeah,
or the end and never the full lot. But it goes like this. Um, It is the power brokers that are ruling and controlling the country. Politicians are just the people in front of the cameras and in front of the microphone communicating the message of the
Yeah,
power brokers.
yeah. Now, some of our viewers might look at that and listen to this and think, "God, that's very, very cynical." But you know, it is reality.
It is a reality, and
Yeah,
it's something that. So on to our next slide, Paul, and let me get this. I'm learning my technological skills as we
yeah.
go. Paul, tell us what this one.
So this is basically to do with the Green Party, who have 12 seats in the current government. Um, so Green backlash, rural TDs say enough is enough. Backbench TDs fear Eamon Ryan's party wields too much power and will damage them at the next election. So basically, this is all kind of to do with the kind of the climate change issue that we are facing at the moment, and some of the measures that the Green Party are are advocating seem to be incompatible with a lot of people in rural Ireland, and it's you can see this in two slides. The Green Party are on the latest poll are on about 3%. Uh, in a latest poll. So on those figures, they'll be looking at a wipeout. But there's also fear, particularly amongst Fine Gael, and I suppose this is the part, probably the part that is probably scaring the life out of Fine Gael at the moment, is that people in rural Ireland, because Fine Gael always would have pitched themselves as a party of farmers and rural areas, um, that they may start turning their attention to it's a kind of rural independence, or maybe a new rural party, which
Hmm.
it seems to be a lot of there's work going on in the background. It would appear. Read somewhere that Michael Carley, he's a Longford Fine Gael TD, that he has said that there have been overtures made to independent councillors in Longford, which would be a predominantly rural county, and maybe some people in Fine Gael might be tempted as well. So be interesting to see if this rural party does
Hmm.
take shape, and if it does take, like, for example, Roshan, if a rural party could get 10, 12 seats,
Yeah.
you know, at the next election, that might, and if Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael fall a little bit short, or Sinn Féin fall a little bit short, there could be, a place for them, be it in a full-blown coalition, or maybe kind of like a confidence and supply job, either as well. But we all know what happens when small parties go into coalition. They can get they can get kicked they can get kicked around at the following election. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. But you know the Green Party, you know are are the friends of rural Ireland at the moment.
No.
Some people wouldn't think so.
Well, there are not even too many friends in the cities either. The turf. Now, like I like my open fire.
Yeah,
It's the only thing that warms my house in the winter. But the turf.
yeah,
I mean, I went hellers and blazers, pardon the
yeah,
pun, blazers, but like with the Green Party, the fuel prices, heating, the
yeah.
electricity, and I wonder, and an awful lot of people wondering, how did a political party and politicians with only 2% of the vote hold so
Mm.
much power within government? How is that?
Well, they have
How is that
12 seats.
possible?
Well, they have 12 seats, which um, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were short. So some people are saying, is the tail wagging the dog, and I can. It could become difficult as budget talks go on. Some of the environmental measures that
Ah, don't get me
maybe brought
started, Paul. Don't
may
get me
maybe brought
started.
up. It could cause a bit of tension in the government as well. So
But you see, I think the government and politicians they're focusing. There's more talk about climate crisis, climate change than any other issue. You know,
Mm.
the Earth has been here for how many years? Well, we don't know how long the Earth has been here, right?
Millions of
Mother
years.
Nature has always looked after herself and the planet.
Yeah.
Climate crisis. I mean, is it a farce or is it a political agenda?
Well,
That's something
true.
we have to ask.
That is a fair question. Yeah. Well, I suppose when you say the word climate change, that says the climate is always going to be changing, and you know, um,
We have that with the four seasons. We have
exactly.
autumn, spring, summer, and winter. That's climate change.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yeah.
is weather fault. So, has it gone too far, Paul? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, I
Because we
suppose if you,
often differ, don't we?
yeah, absolutely. But like even the like you say, okay, you can't cut turf, but we'll import a load of turf from Germany and stuff like that. You know, sure, and surely that's gonna like adding air miles, and that's infecting the carbon footprint. So, you know, in one sense, they're trying to make sense in one way, and in another way, they're totally contradicting themselves. You know, in another, which kind of makes and it doesn't annoy people, and there are certain. I've been at a meeting in rural Kilkenny there not that long ago, and there are people in urban areas who don't get rural Ireland, or you know
Mm,
don't want to get it either as well. You know what I mean? So, you know, you're not always going to agree with someone else's point of view, but at least if you can try to understand where they're coming from, maybe
yes.
that's important, because at least you can become a bit more informed on things. But uh, I don't know. It's going to be very 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 challenging, and I can see why Fine Gael will be getting a little bit worried.
I would too, because they were usually, she said, the farmers. And I just think, you know, I just think there's a massive disconnect between
Mm,
majority of the politicians and what the people are grassroots. They're not even listening to their own grassroots members.
mm,
So there's a big disconnect there. Right, moving on to the next one.
yeah.
And again, oh, here we
Okay.
go, Paul. Green
Oh yeah,
Party again.
yeah. So the next, so there was a poll there recently, and it had Green Party on 3%. So on those numbers, they would lose all the 12 seats they have. So Eamon Ryan, who's a TD in Dublin based South, um, could potentially lose his seat to a Fine Gael candidate. Maybe Kate O'Connell might make a comeback, or James Geoghegan might. This the fella that ran for them in the by election in 2021, I think.
Right.
Um, he might claim that seat, but it it looks like, yeah, on those numbers,
And I suppose
uh,
it didn't help
they
Eamon
could be
Ryan.
they could be between zero on a really really bad day and maybe three on a good day.
And I think it'll come up on election day because the public have not been forgiven of Eamon Ryan falling asleep in Doyle. Aaron.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
falling asleep. That's just is that really what it shows us? Now, I'm not a favor, and I don't. And you and I both agree we don't like opinion journalists. We're not a journalist, but we've been
mm,
broadcasters for a long time, and with media and PR being my background and degree,
yeah,
and we're both radio presenters. Well, I was previously,
yeah.
but I mean, has it all gone crazy? The Green Party just added the la 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 party of the country. I mean, do they live in
Yeah.
la la land and not have a
Yeah.
clue about really? I mean, what was
Well,
it?
if you look at the 12 TDs that they have, eight of them are based in Dublin, so that might explain some of the rationale that they're showing they show at times. But
Yeah.
you know,
Uh-huh.
the problem they probably have, and I was reading in an article, is that their their policies do not kind of compute with most people's daily lives at times. So their problem is that how do you kind of get them to meet? How where can you meet in the middle? Okay, yes, the climate is an issue. We all have to play our part, but at the same time, we can't be hammering people. You know what I mean? So like the what you call it, the fuel excise went up. You know,
Cost of
that's
living.
exactly. And you know yourself, Roshan, when fuel goes up, petrol goes up, everything else goes up.
And they put the
So
petrol back up again, Paul. I mean, the petrol went down and then they brought it back up again. And there's a
yeah,
cost of living crisis. It does.
exactly.
Do you know what they need? They need single parents in Leinster House. All and we'll sort out the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or bring Phil Hogan back.
Yeah, but yeah. When you're single parents, they know how to stick to a budget and you know make that budget go as far as they can.
Well, you know what? We don't have to, like, it's just unbelievable. But we'll talk about that in another program. I'm just
Hmm.
having a technical issue here, Paul. Bear with me. As
Yeah.
everybody knows, when it comes to technology, I'm blind.
So
So Paul, tell us about this. You were very intrigued by these articles here.
yeah, this was in the Sunday Independent. This is what Ireland thinks. You know, this was their a research company that they did they've done this research for the Sunday Independent. Now, people might say, you know, who's doing this, who's doing these opinion polls, and how accurate and how objective are they? You know, that's probably another day's discussion. But it's just some interesting findings here as well. So, according to this, the most popular leader of all the political parties is Holly Kearns
Holly
on 44%.
Kearns.
Yeah, uh,
She's only just a newly novice political leader.
absolutely, and she's it's amazing story when you think
Is this
about.
PR profiling, do you think, Paul? Is this where the media are actually profile building and putting her out there? A bit of
Well, if you look at these opinion polls here, you have the Social Democrats on 6%, Fianna Fáil on 19, Fine Gael on 20, and Sinn Féin on 32. So there is a very strong possibility. Now, I could we could look back on this program in 2 years' time or 18 years' time and look like complete absolute fools with this prediction. And as I said, all predictions come with a health warning. Um, that the Social Democrats could potentially have maybe 6 to 10 seats that could be like a new rural party, could be, the could form part of government in a coalition. So are they kind of is the media kind of saying, well, the Greens are kind of they're heading for the exit door, so we need to find a new kingmaker, and maybe they're looking for that in the Social Democrats. And of course, with if the Social Democrats are going to do well, that's going to hit the Labour Party, naturally, because you know the Social Democrats was formed by Roisin Shortall, who's
mm,
former Labour Party TD and junior minister, and the Labour Party on 3% as well. That wouldn't spell a good election result for them if these polls were to be repeated as well. Um, so yeah, and Sinn Féin still for the last number of months running the most popular party in Ireland, and by a nice distance there. Fine Gael on 20%, so they're about 12% above Fine Gael, and Fianna Fáil on 19%. It's amazing to think that, because one time Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael could get nearly 90% of the vote between them, and now they're struggling to get close close to 40, which is absolutely incredible. It just goes to show, how politics in the country has changed, and maybe how fragmented the whole system has become. But maybe that's not a bad thing, because maybe it has to fragment and then realign. So be interested to see what that realignment is going to look like.
tell us about the Holly Kearns' political career, Paul.
Yeah, she ran. She got elected to Cork County Council in 2019 by the total of one vote.
One vote.
One vote. Yeah,
One
yeah.
vote.
I remember reading somewhere that there was a woman.
Wow.
There was a woman at home. She came home. She was working that day, and she kind of was tired. I don't feel like going out. I'm tired and all that. And his her daughter said, "Ma'am, go out and vote for Holly. She's a good she's a good lady, like." And so she pulled herself out of the out of the couch and went down to her local polling booth and voted for. So she got elected by one vote, and and her own being elected to Cork. I think it is either is it Cork North South Cork Southwest, along with Christopher O'Sullivan of Fianna Fáil, who was her former boyfriend, which I'm sure made a very interesting campaign. And we've also Michael Collins, the independent TD. So not many people would have predicted her getting elected, and a lot of people have said that she took a Fine Gael seat and that Fine Gael would have come and take it in the next election and all that. But um, no, it's been a pretty whirlwind rise for in the last few years as well. And speaking of, you spoke of lone parents there,
Mm,
moments ago, Roisin. I think her grandmother was involved
yeah,
with the establishment of Cherish, which is
cherish.
now one parent family Ireland. So um, yeah, she's come a long way in a very very short space of time, and
And then she all of a sudden, for out of nowhere, Roisin Shortall and Catherine um, just stood aside, and
yeah,
Holly Kearns was elected. Do you think, because this is what an awful lot of people are saying,
be
and
elected
especially
or
women,
selected, one or the other.
yes, was she selected to be elected? And
Hmm.
now is all this profile building, political profile building, really, really trying to get the women's votes, right? And I have an issue with this because all this gender quotas and all this issue,
Mm.
and we're going to talk about that coming up.
Yeah,
Is she being politically manufactured with all this PR? That's just my concern. And
yeah,
that women aren't stupid. Women are not just going to vote. What we're going to talk about now is, women are not just going to vote for women just because they're women. We want the right
yeah.
person
Oh
to
yeah,
be elected. So
yeah.
and so,
There you
Paul,
go.
and
Yeah,
this brings us really onto the next article about gender quotas. Equality
yeah.
activists want 1,000 women to run in the local elections. Paul, I mean, gender quotas, have they gone mad? You know, it's like,
Mm.
oh, we need to fill the gender quotas. Gender quotas
Yeah,
don't work, and women are not going to vote for women just because they're women, as I said.
yeah, yeah. Well, on the same, if you're flip side, Roisin, as well, if you look at our in local government, at in the Dáil, women still are in they're still in the minority as regards, it's still more male dominated. So we do need to see more women, getting involved, and more importantly getting elected. So because if you have, say, a situation where it's fair male versus female, or you're going to get different outcomes. Whereas if you can, the other argument would be that
Do you think so,
um
Paul? Do you think that women will talk and vote for women's issues? Because I think we've seen it where they haven't done. I don't think I
mm,
think women will toe the party whip. Women
mm,
will toe the political line within the party.
yeah,
So I don't think, and as a woman myself, I'm not going to vote for a woman just
yeah,
because she's a woman, unless and she
yeah.
is the right woman for the job.
Well, absolutely. And it's actually, I think Phil Hogan introduced this, that in general elections, that political parties, they have to run a minimum of 30% female candidates, or they can risk a cut in their state funding as well. So, you know, it's like a lot of things. If you want to focus the minds, make it an economic issue as well. Because,
Mm,
but it is, you know, my concern would be that in those, and I don't, women don't want to be, put in as like a token candidate. They were like, we're kind of short here. We need a woman. We'll just slot her in, and then that's a box tick. No, I think in any other job you go for, you'd say you get a job on merit, and same if
mm,
you go for the doll, you should go. should get elected on merit. But I do agree too as well that women do get a harder time, and I think some of it is extremely unfair, and and you know
Yeah.
and doesn't help. Like I remember reading an article about 2 years ago, and it was at Fianna Fáil thinking, and they were rating what all the female TDs were wearing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was very, very, um,
I remember that,
it was
Paul.
good for journalism
Yeah.
for want of another word, because you wouldn't be analysing what a man wears or doesn't wear or stuff like that, you know. So
But Fianna Fáil brought the women out deliberately for that to show that it was a female party. Now I
yeah,
think that was Fianna Fáil did that. They, it was Micheál Martin and all the women, all the female TDs, right? All
mm,
county councillors. There was no need for that. That was just like,
yeah,
oh, we're great gender equality, gender quotas, and
yeah,
everything
yeah,
else. Well, it was actually, I actually thought, when I looked at it, I laughed and went, oh my God, what are they doing? Bring out the women. Is that the sympathy vote? Is that,
yeah.
what's he looking for?
You know,
Yeah.
I I'm a man, and I can thought that was very demeaning
Yeah,
myself.
I thought it was demeaning. Yeah,
Yeah,
and even and I do agree that an awful lot of the media are very hostile to female politicians. I do agree with that,
yeah,
and it's not a nice place for women to. But there again, Paul,
mm,
we've had some amazing female politicians. We've had who are, you know what? They didn't let the little nitty gritty things get to them. They went in, they
yeah,
did the job. Mary O'Rourke,
yeah, yeah.
Norma was the Minister for Justice years ago, and there's so
Oh,
many women.
Nora Owen, sorry.
Nora Owens, that's it, the
Yes.
name. I had brain fog moment there. Nora
Mm,
Owens. They didn't worry. They weren't interested or worried about what the paper said, what they weren't. They went in and did the job.
exactly.
An awful lot of things, though, that Holly Kearns is getting a lot of hassle about within the media, and really it's justifiable. And
Yeah.
it's because it's got my nerves an awful lot too. She's reading from a script.
Yeah, I saw that online, and someone commented on that she was looking down at a clipboard a lot, and you know,
Yeah.
you know that would you know
So the media,
pay a lot of that
yeah,
would kind of give your a lot of people's theory that yeah, she's potentially manufactured or scripted. Yeah,
yeah, and
a lot of reasons.
whether it's male or female, we want politicians to run and to canvass and get elected because they
Yeah,
have passion, they have energy, and they will be very vocal for
yeah,
for their issues, for their constituency. We don't want
yeah,
someone going in and reading from a script. We want someone up there
yeah.
with passion and energy and just that zest for
I remember
political issues.
I remember someone telling me before. No, I'm not comparing a man against a woman here. No,
You
but
wouldn't dare, Paul.
oh, I know. um, that he heard Pat Rabbit speak, and Pat Rabbit spoke for about 45 to 50 minutes on 4 bullet points. So that'll tell you,
Yeah. I think
you know,
too, Holly is she's very, I think, and this is what worries me is the media
mm,
always, uh, they build people up just
well,
to
it should
bring
be
them
done.
down.
Absolutely, yeah,
And I just think the whole thing seems very manufactured,
yeah,
and it's too polished for me as a
yeah.
woman. It's too polished. We want to see
Mm-hmm.
women go in there, and just go, hey, come on. Like Mo
Yeah.
Molan, Paul. Like I grew up in
Oh,
the
yeah,
north of Mo Molan,
great one.
and Mary O'Rourke and Norma Owens. They
Yeah,
went in and they were passionate and they were everything else.
even
They weren't,
even in Kilkenny, where we're from, Roisin, we've had some great people like so
yeah,
Mary Fitzpatrick, Mary Hill
yeah.
Kavanagh is still going strong, and
Tell
she's
us
going
about,
to
yeah,
she'll run again, and she'll get elected again. Um, Betty Manning, she was a very good person as well.
yeah.
They're three fabulous politicians that any woman, if you're interested in politics or running for politics, if you're looking for examples, you couldn't go too far wrong by looking at those three men.
Mary Hilda Kavanagh, Paul. Tell us briefly about Mary Hilda Kavanagh because it's a lovely story there. I interviewed
Yeah,
her on the radio, and I really enjoyed. I did a featured interview with her. Might put that in this week as well.
yeah. To my knowledge, now I'm open to her. I think she's the longest serving
Yes,
councillor in the country. There was a man in there was a man in Waterford. He passed away, Davy Daniels, um, there last year. So Mary Hilda, she's the longest serving councillor, and if she was to, I'm more than likely she's going to run in the next election next year. She will have been in Kilkenny County Council for 40 years, which will be, you know, sorry, would it be 40? No,
she was
be
20. I
50.
think around 21, because she canvassed. She joined and canvassed
Mm,
when she was in college, and she canvassed for Gareth Fitzgerald. This is how I know,
sorry,
because I
sorry,
interviewed her.
she'd be 50 years a councillor if she gets re-elected.
Mm,
1974 to
yeah,
2024 is 50 years, yeah.
and
So
the
be a
story
phenomenal
is
achievement.
the story is, Paul, that she goes through all the accounts and money within Kilkenny County Council with a fine tooth comb. There's no
Oh,
money. We don't spend unless there's money. And I've never met her, but I interviewed
yeah,
her, and I really enjoyed interviewing her. There's no messing with Mary Hilda Kavanagh, and she's
yeah.
a
That's one
lady.
thing. That's one
She's
thing
a
a lot of
lady.
people say is she's straight, and
Yeah,
if
and
she
she's a
says she will
lady.
do, and she says she do something, she will.
Yeah, and yeah. So on to our next article, Paul.
Oh, we
Okay.
might if you go back. Forgot to mention. Yeah, if you see there, the Olympian Paul O'Donovan, he graduated from UCC as a doctor, and your own daughter Naomi was in the same graduate class as Paul O'Donovan.
She
So
was, yeah.
congratulations to Paul O'Donovan, obviously, for becoming a qualified doctor, and your own daughter Naomi. So wish her every success for the future.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I didn't realize I was sitting down while they were all waiting for their photographs at the
Yeah,
president's door, which I didn't
yeah.
know until the Friday of the conferring that that was a very famous door. And I was sitting on the little bench beside the president's door, and this lady came and sat beside me, and we were chatting because apparently, Paul,
Yeah.
no student, there's a myth, or there's a legend, or a story that no student should walk across the grass in front of the building because they
Okay.
won't graduate. And this lady and I were talking about that, and we were saying, we didn't believe that because, like, that was probably just a myth that they told everybody throughout the years to keep them off the
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah.
And we were chatting about away, and it was actually Paula Donovan's granny I was chatting to. So yeah,
Very good.
yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. So fair dues to my daughter, Paul. Very
Yeah,
fair dues.
it's a phenomenal achievement for a future.
Post-grad medicine. She was a radiographer before that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the red. Now we were talking about politics before, Paul. So
Mm.
this one here is the red poll. The red poll. Oops,
Red Sea Poll, yeah.
Red Sea poll. I don't.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
so we were talking about the Red Sea polls.
Of all the what you call it, the polling companies, these generally tend to be the most accurate and the most reputable. So any poll I would see by them, I would, you know, um, pay attention to what it's saying without a
And
shadow of a
Paul,
doubt.
would you say too, like the Red Sea poll, it's very damning for the government because the concerns for this was around the housing of refugees and asylum seekers.
Yeah.
No one has any issues with anyone who are genuinely fleeing war or fleeing for their lives. You
Mm.
know, but the whole consensus of this was that the government was just as an open border, too many asylum seekers coming into the country.
Yeah.
We don't have the structure in place
Yeah. And
to look
I
after
suppose
everybody.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's a very fair point, and I suppose we take into account that we've taken in for 80,000 Ukrainian
Mm.
refugees, and add that there to some other things that we have as well. The UK government has adopted a Rwanda immigration policy, so any refugees kind of coming into the country, um, if they go to Britain, they're going to end up in Rwanda. So anybody, if you were if you were God forbid fleeing, you'd be saying, God, I don't want to go to Rwanda or come to Ireland, all right, because it's an English speaking country. So, but like, it is creating a lot of pressure, and there is tension there, and I think the government needs to do more as regards communicating with people as well, because it seems to be, even local government officials will tell you this, that they're being told last minute, this is happening. It creates a kind of, it creates uncertainty, and it creates, and when uncertainty is in a vacuum, that can create that can create problems as well. So 75 people, so that's nearly what, 75%. So that's close to seven now of every 10 people, um, are feeling there is a concern there. So it's going to be interesting to see how the government um, is going to address it, because in the program for government there is a commitment in it to uh, um, there is a commitment to phase out completely the whole system of direct provision, but given what's happened with the war in Ukraine and what's happening now at the moment, that's very, very unlikely.
But direct provision is not fit for purpose as it
No, no.
stood
It
anyway.
was a temporary measure brought in 2000, so that's
Mm.
23 years ago, and it's still there, and it is something that really needs to be looked at. And it would also be interesting to see um, the profits that are potentially being made by certain companies from the whole system
Yeah,
as well. It can be
yeah.
extremely lucrative as well.
And that's what Maddie McGrath was saying, talking to Ben Scallion, is just
Yeah,
here. He was talking in that YouTube clip. He was saying it's a lot about money. When people first
absolutely.
came, people were opening their doors,
Yeah,
hosting them, and now it's become about money, hotels,
yeah.
private
Oh yeah,
business. And he also said that that Deputy McGrath also said that we should have a referendum on the immigration. And also in uh, the papers, also the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar says elderly won't be left in the lurch when nursing homes are converted for refugees. I
mm,
mean, really?
yeah,
Even at the headline causes
yeah. A
really
lot of
massive
concern. Yeah,
concerns.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So
Who
it is.
is who? I have a question. Who in God's name, Paul? And this is something. Who in God's name is advising Leo Varadkar and his PR? Leo Varadkar used to be so PR polished.
Oh,
Now
very-
I'm questioning, like, where's he coming out with all these statements? Who is advising him? Because
yeah.
it's becoming a real. I think that for me personally,
A
it's
soap opera.
yeah, it's a comedy strip. If it wasn't so serious, it would be a comedy script. Who is
Yeah,
writing the script coming from Leinster House?
it's a very good question. It's a very good question. And actually, if you go back to in the in the Ireland Thinks poll, they list a number of issues that would say of importance right here, right now. Of course, housing and our health, housing,
Yeah,
housing, followed by the cost of living, followed by the health services are in the top three, and immigration has gone from 10% of of importance now up to 17%. So it's certainly becoming an issue, and it's a difficult one in a sense, because if you want to have a proper, informed debate about it, it's very difficult, because if you take a particular position, you can be
censored.
censored or labeled as one. You could be called a racist. You could be called you don't care about your own country. Stuff like that.
Called
So
far right. Even asking a question, you
yeah,
could be called
exactly,
far right. And as
exactly.
we know, there's many radio presenters all being shut down. So
Yeah,
so we're going to talk about that a little later on. But people are censored, and we're going to
yeah.
talk about hate speech a little later on as well. So next one, Paul, is you talk about homelessness.
Oh yes, the problem that doesn't seem to be going away, and even more grim in that. So the headline figure is 12,259 people are officially classed as homeless, but even more shameful and grim, the new record includes 3,590, so nearly 3,600 children are homeless, and more than 1,700 families and 171 pensioners. So, you know, we're definitely seeing the bite from when the eviction ban was lifted. We've seen, a lot of people have been made homeless, and the, of course the rental market in Ireland is a complete and utter disaster. Um, but this is the issue that it's kind of like the health service. We have more money than ever to deal with the issue, but it doesn't seem to be um, going away in particular as well. So it's it's going to be one of the top issues in the next election, definitely, and it has been since about 2014 officially.
We have a housing crisis. We have a HSE crisis. We have a crisis in everything.
Mm.
And yet, it just seems to be a crisis after crisis, and we're not fixing the crises before more crisis. We seem to be the
Yeah,
crisis country,
yeah, yeah.
and we're
Even
not
go
fixing it.
even take a local authority for example. If a house becomes vacant, you can say to any county councillor, say a house becomes vacant, and someone say, well, that could be interested, might be on the housing list there. Um, it could take them months to actually get the funding from local government to do up and renovate the actual house itself, and make it, that someone can go in there. So there are lots of little things, you know in the system that are not. Of course,
Yeah,
we had this discussion earlier on in the year that are not. It's not help. It doesn't help. That I think it's probably gone beyond the crisis now. It's
yeah,
become a scandal, really.
yeah. Like many other things since the beginning of the Free State. So moving on, Paul, from
Yeah,
we were talking earlier on about the climate change and everything
yeah.
else. The Green Party now want to cull cows. 200 cows must be culled to hit climate targets. I mean, so
Mm,
they've gone after the old people, they've gone after the women, they've gone after everything else. So now they're going after the cows. They've gone after the
yeah,
heating. I mean,
yeah.
the poor cows. I know nothing about
Mm,
cows. All I know is they moo, and that's where we get our milk from. I
yeah.
know nothing about agriculture or farming. But my God, Paul, the cows causing climate
And,
change.
and and seemingly
Ah,
a measure like this will cost in the region of 600 million uh, to do. So because if an animal has to be culled, well then farmers are going to have to be compensated. That's a so
but
it's
why kill the cows? We're importing beef from Brazil. So
yeah.
why are we culling cows to import beef from
And Brazilian
Brazil?
beef is known to be of a far inferior quality to what we have here in our own country.
Yes, and when you think about it, that's why we have such good milk and such good butter because we have the good grass and we have the
Yeah,
right environment for that because of our weather. So here we come, the
yeah.
Green Party saying, "Oh, cull the cows." Well,
And
so we
it's
won't have
it's
good
more
butter.
it's most likely as well that given the current trajectory that the country is on as regards climate, we won't meet our targets by 2030. So it's
Paul.
very, very likely that either this government or the next government will have to go back to Europe, and all European countries are probably going to have to reassess the targets that they have.
Well, you know what? I'm beginning to think more and more and more the climate issues is a load of baloney. As this little boy, I love this photograph, Paul. I love it.
Yeah,
No farmers, no food, no future. And that
yeah,
is what worries me. And I think the other image down below with the cow, I think that's what. Is that what our mainstream media and our government think of us sitting at home watching
yeah,
the television, watching the news, or is that what we are watching within the mainstream
mm,
media?
yeah.
Who is the media? Is there an imbalance now with the media, Paul?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there an
yeah.
absolute, the media are not covering both sides of the story. The
Not at all.
media should
Not
be
at all.
questioning. The role of the media is to
Mm.
question politicians and call government into account.
Yeah, you
So
know,
on,
it's
yeah,
it's essential in any functioning democracy that media is uh, you know free and open to question things.
yeah. So there we go. I just think that's really funny. And
Yeah.
that came so also, Paul, going
Mm.
back to the that you were telling me that the soaring numbers in receipt of emergency state help has reached
Yes.
over an alarming amount.
Yeah. This is probably another kind of fallout from the from the cost of living crisis. So there is what's called a emergency or supplementary welfare. So anyone can apply to their local community welfare officer, and they can make a determination on you to give you an additional payment to help you with a particular need that you might have. And according to this, over 180,000 claims for basic necessities like fuel and electricity have been granted in the last number of months. So that's just to provide the
Mm.
basic things. You know what
And
I
who
mean?
put
So
up the electricity?
yeah,
And who put up that? Well,
yeah.
we won't talk about that particular color. So
And it's a vicious circle by
yeah,
not addressing, by the government kind of say only tinkering at the edges at one side. They're creating another pressure so that the government, i.e. the state, so people who are paying taxpayers, are kind of having to, you know, subsidize that rise, as well. So it's a kind of it kind of just goes to show, Roisin, when you look at all the statistics and stuff like that, where job figures, we're at kind of pretty much record full employment. I think unemployment is about 3%, but the cost of everything is just so big,
astronomical. And it's
astronomical.
manufactured. It's manufactured, Paul. The
Yeah,
the government could take control of the fuel and electricity companies, and
yeah.
they could do something about it, and the petrol and the
Oh
cost
yeah.
of living. The government could do that. That is within their power. They're not. And I think the headline here, which I'm just seeing, Paul, you
It's
know,
kind of some people might argue, Roshan, it's a very kind of a neoliberal thing to do, that you don't really interfere, or you just do as little as possible, because God forbid you upset markets, So I don't know, is it it would look like it's profit before people instead of people before profit.
oh, don't get me on that, people before profit. We'll move swiftly on
Yeah,
to
yeah.
where it says soaring numbers in receipt of emergency state help. And then the
Mm.
next headline, Paul, is Brendan O'Connor says money doesn't make us happy. Who knew? Money
Yeah,
doesn't make us happy, but it's also about peace of mind. Money gives you
exactly.
peace of mind. So
Absolutely.
I think coming up to Paul and I'm just going to briefly, and is
Mm.
talk about this. The abortion issue is coming back up. This is not
Yeah.
going to go away.
Oh,
I just wanted to mention that in this because I think the government are now saying, about the abortions. They're talking about having the abortion go over the 12-week issue. Like, and some
yeah.
people even talk about up to full term. This is
Right.
going to be a massive election issue. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about this maybe a little bit later on when we
Yeah.
have more information, and just we will talk about
Yeah,
this.
there's been a report on abortion services in our, because it's 5 years since the legislation came into being, and 5 years is a good time to look and review and stuff like that. And there've been a number of recommendations that the health committee are going through. But yeah, it's going to be an important issue, because
Mm,
it's a very delicate
it is. I've
subject.
always been asking, Paul, and I've been asking it for years.
Mm.
Okay, we have abortion, but my concern is and I've been asking everybody, I've been asking all the media on Twitter,
Yeah,
what happens to the bodies and the fetuses of a baby after being aborted? No one can answer that question, or no one wants to ask that answer that question.
yeah. It's a very
That's
fair
my
question. All
concern.
right.
So, SIP2, tell us about the SIP2 water services strike, Paul.
Yeah, this is all around. There are staff working in the water sections in our local councils. So under this, that they would that those staff would transfer from uh, local government into what was then called Irish Water, is now called Ishka Air, um, and I suppose the worry that unions had was that they would be, they'll be transferring into a semi state company, and that their their terms and conditions would be of lesser standards. So it has so SIP2 have confirmed that a 2-day strike had been called off following the decision by the Minister for uh, Local Government and Heritage, Darragh O'Brien. So basically, he's allowing workers to stay within the local authorities. And I suppose, given the extremely warm weather that we're experiencing at the moment, had this gone had this strike gone ahead, it could have caused a lot of problems. But thankfully, it's been averted, and it's good to see unions, standing up and fighting for their members as well.
Well, that's what they've been paid to do, Paul.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm very cynical of unions. I always think that I'm very cynical of them now. That's what they're paid to do. They're paid to represent
Mm.
their their union. Paul, this is very concerning to me.
Mm.
Um, the hate speech laws. This is
Yeah,
very concerning because even what we're talking about tonight on this video, we actually could be breaking the new hate
potentially,
speech
yeah.
law. And well, you know what? They may take me into prison because you know what? You probably could be me coming visiting me in prison, Paul, because I think this is absolutely censoring the people, and it's a
Mm.
dictatorship, in my opinion. And
And
there's a
it's from my understanding, Roisin, it's cleared most stages in the Dáil, and there's only got a couple of stages left to go through in the Shannon, and then back, once it's passed in the Shannon, it'll go back to the Dáil, and then it will go for the president um
mm,
to sign on the advice of the government.
So what are they going to do? Then decide we haven't got enough prisons, and then so they have to build more prisons and put the citizens who are in saying something who all people
Mm.
who are offended by, or
Yeah,
it's it's crazy. This is going to be a really explosive election campaign, I
yeah,
think.
and look, there's always going to be limitations on speech, of free speech, to a certain degree. Like, we're on a channel here, there's certain things we cannot
Mm,
say, because if we do say it, we'll be kicked off straight away.
yeah,
There's no doubt about it. But you know,
but common sense.
where do you draw the line? Where does
Yeah,
common sense of it, you know? And it could potentially cause other problems as well. It could make us very intellectually very lazy. So
is that the plan? Is that in college, Paul, you're taught to be and told to have critical thinking,
yeah,
right? Now they're telling you, oh, don't say this, everybody's easily offended. And in
yeah,
college, to have critical thinking. But everybody knows in college, follow your brief and
yeah,
follow the opinions of your
yeah,
lecturer if you want to get good grades.
true,
So,
true.
that is a big issue. And, this also has that you're not allowed to question, is this hate
Uh,
speech bill a deliberate strategy so we do not ask questions and it silences us as a nation and the citizens of Ireland?
yeah. And is this going to have? I know Ireland had one of the, you know, most strictest kind of even libel laws as well, because there are a lot of celebrities coming to Ireland to sue people as well. So I'm sure
Yeah.
this might have a a knock on there as well. So it's
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 worrying.
a it's a hard one. It's a hard one to call, but you know, I think
Well, here's the
common sense needs to prevail, and if common sense prevails, it should be easy to distinguish between fair comment and incitement to hatred. But
yeah.
I don't think common sense is that common at the moment.
I think it's gone out the window. Anyway, moving on. One journalist who is not afraid to ask the hard questions and it's become
Yeah,
quite popular with the citizens of Ireland is Ben Scallion. So we'll
yeah.
be looking out for more. He's, I think, Paul, when he goes to press conferences and there's government ministers,
Or
I think
they
they
kind of
cringe.
they
And
cringe absolutely. Yeah.
moving on, because I'm conscious of time.
Mm,
An awful lot of thing at the door is, and it's really is the transgender issue. And for me personally, Paul, and what I've said before, if somebody wants to transition to change, that when they're adults, that's their opinion. It's none of
yeah,
my business. But however, it's like defining a woman.
yeah.
If you transition, you're not a woman, and don't
No,
and women's spaces should be women's spaces. And I
yeah,
actually think I'm really opposed, and I know many parents are about it really been putting the transgender uh, ideology onto children in schools and children
yeah,
as low as primary schools. And the LGB have come out and said that they wanted to be separated from the TG, the transgender
yeah,
uh, logo, that it's actually causing them a lot of they don't agree with it, and they don't agree with it being
yeah.
imposed upon children. We're going to talk an awful lot more about this going forward, and the gender dysphoria. And how
Mm,
can we, this is what it gets me with the government here, Paul, like, and
yeah,
with all politicians. They, how can they talk about the transgender issues, and especially on children, when we still haven't gotten over the two mother and baby homes? Where
yeah.
was that really? You have to question,
Mm.
you know, does the Irish state really have issue against women and children?
And you're not going back 100 years either.
No,
Yeah,
the 70s, the
yeah,
70s. You know, you know, and this has not even been clarified, sorted, or even a real in-depth apology is still going on. And, it makes me, they talk about all these beautiful pictures of the children. It was the Catholic Church and the state
mm,
stealing children from their mothers' wombs, stealing, and mothers didn't know their child had been adopted. And
yeah,
really, it was state and religion, child and baby. And I'm not going to say it in case we get put off, but I'm putting a ring around here.
yeah,
Here. So, and again, uh, Paul, I spoke to Met Pass and on the phone with a very long conversation, and they actually said that Ireland is on the same watch list as Romania and Saudi Arabia with the human trafficking, child trafficking, and sex trafficking. And this is something Ireland has not um, tackled at all. So
yeah.
we'll be talking about that going forward as Paul. That's it for this week. I don't know if we
Yeah.
have gone over time or not,
Ah,
but
sure. The time flew anyway.
well, Paul, we thought we'd do something different, and we thought we
Yeah,
would just
exactly.
talk
Exactly.
about election issues. There's a lot more election issues, but
Oh
this is
yeah,
the
yeah,
ones that is in the mainstream papers
yeah,
and in the
yeah,
social media, YouTube, and in that I'm including YouTube and
yeah.
Telegram.
Things are hotting up, and it's not just the weather.
And Paul, that's coming up to the close of the show. So it's a goodbye from me.
That's goodbye from me, Paul Brophy.
Just realised we sound like the two Ronnies.